understanding even the basic grammar of this lesson. So, I want someone, this lecture is called Framework 101. Can someone tell me what framework is and what its purpose in debate is? Emily. Emily. Yes, Emily.
Yeah.
I know your names. I don't know which ones match to which people, though. What's framework and what's its purpose in debate?
Honestly, I don't really understand it.
Okay, that's fine. Does anyone want to take a shot here? For doubling down on the candy. Okay. In recent-ish years, there have been a rise in non-traditional policy affirmatives, some which engage with the resolution metaphorically, tangentially, or some not at all. I'd say the resolution itself is problematic. The idea that we should switch sides in debate on the resolution is anti-educational, and there's a better model for debate. You are, at some point in your career, if you stay in debate, going to hear these acts that say the way we're doing debate right now is flawed. And before we can think about debating the resolution, we need to think about the process of debate itself. We need to have a debate about debate and come up with a better, more productive way to get education from this space. You've seen the critical labs in the packet? I thought I was going to be sure about that statement, but no, I'm not. JG Lab. How many apps have you seen from the pre-camp packet? 2. Which apps? Okay. Novice Lab. Which apps have you seen, or app? School choice. Thank you, Dan. All right. So there are 4 apps in the camp packet: school choice, reallocation, Black Lives Matter, and education without bounds. Each of you have been exposed to different apps in that packet. Let's talk about the Black Lives Matter app for a second. The Black Lives Matter app says we need to entirely re-gear the way we approach education in elementary and secondary school. We should not have a discussion necessarily about the process of United States federal government implementation of education reform, because that obscures a more important debate about whether or not schools foster activism or conformism. And right now, schools, specifically through Common Core, foster conformistic ideologies. They enculturate students to be neoconservative or neoliberal. They have disciplinary boundaries on what teachers can do with the students that limits out activist approaches to education and locks in a boring, standardized, test-based model of education that denies the lived realities of the experiences of marginalized people, people of color, and low-income families. The research lecture, Kevin played those clips to demonstrate education policy isn't equally accessible to everyone. And this app says that's true. We can't talk about education policy through the lens of the United States federal government implementation. We'll still talk about education policy, but things like process counter plans, politics, disads, all that stuff misses the point of what we need to talk about to really have a conversation about education policy. And the app advocates a radical change from the status quo. It says throw Common Core out, reinvent the wheel, connect education pedagogy, the way we teach education, to activism through the lens of Black Lives Matter. Really, Black Lives Matter-based education pedagogy, which generally means that education should more reflect the lived realities of the students getting that education. It should be materially connected for strategies for change, where things are flawed in the status quo, the world as it is now. And that's a big change from the status quo. It's a change in education policy. But that abscess, this first half of the resolution that says we have to have debates about whether or not the United States federal government should, that sets us up for a bunch of debates that void the content of the affirmative. And we're not going to play ball. We're not going to even try to be topical under that first half of the resolution. We will be a change in education policy, but we're not going to play ball with that USFG stuff. Now, you all are probably familiar with topicality. Topicality argument says we should have a limited, bounded discussion of only a certain number of things. There are 17 topical affirmatives, and if you're not one of those 17 topical affirmatives, then we will not debate you, or it is not possible to have a good debate, because limits are important. You can't prepare for every affirmative, right? There's a limited number of time in the day. You're like busy people with things to do. You gotta catch up on like your favorite TV show. You gotta play sports a little bit. You gotta like do your homework. Life's busy. You don't have time to cut a paste egg to 10,000 different affirmatives. That's topicality, right? Be the rest. So this is easy, right? This is an easy decision. The AF said they weren't gonna play ball. They weren't gonna be topical, so you read topicality and you win, right? That's just like it. It's game over. The AF said we're not gonna be topical. Maybe in like the 1990s, but things have gotten a little bit different and a little bit more complicated. And the non-traditional affirmative side of debate have developed a slew of creative and important and challenging arguments about why we do need to hear alternative forms of evidence and alternative visions of the topic. The fact that debate was failing students of color, not providing opportunities, as many opportunities for minorities within debate means that debate itself needed to change. That is the argument, a argument of the non-traditional affirmative. So framework is just topicality. Framework says, we said, there was a resolution. In some way, you have deviated from that resolution. Please, could you have just been a topical affirmative? There's not much of a meaningful distinction in terms of labels between topicality and framework. And there are a couple of people who will fight to the death that difference in labels matters, and I've never understood that. Framework largely is just a connotated version of topicality that refers to a set of topicality debates where people aren't really even putting up a fight to say that they're topical. Or maybe they are, but they're re-envisioning what it means to be topical. Generally, framework just means a tea debate against a team that's non-traditional, i.e. they're not defending a traditional plan or a traditional implementation of a plan. But if you want to answer the question, what is framework? It's tea. It's topicality. It's the argument that says you have to be the resolution. Now, these debates are going to go down differently than tea debates, which is why I will usually shorthand these debates as framework debates and not tea debates, because the debate looks different. You're having a different kind of impact debate on topicality. Against a traditional affirmative, you'll say our interpretation is better for limits, and they'll say it's not. We think our interpretation solves enough of limits and also has an education net benefit that we should learn about this part of the topic. And there's going to be a different set of impacts for a traditional framework argument, or for a framework argument than for a traditional tea argument. So let's talk about some of those impacts. I want to talk about neg framework impacts first. I'm going to write out 4 things on the board. Decision-making skills, and I'm going to shorthand, so you should write what I say, not what I write. Decision-making skills, state good, I feel like the entire room is shaking when I walk. Deliberation, and topic education. The mainstream framework impacts tend to fall into one of these 4 impact areas. Topic education. We're going to start at the bottom. We have topic. Since your app deviates from that topic, we don't have the opportunity to learn about that topic. This topic is really important. We only get to spend so much time talking about education policy, talking about China policy. And it's important for Americans to be literate on education, on China policy, on whatever next year's topic is. It's important for our role as either citizens or participants in society to understand education policy. And like, y'all are students, it's maybe doubly important for you to understand education policy. The factors that are shaping your life and how you are enculturated to know the world. This is a whole impact area to say, we do need to learn about the topic because this topic is important. This is your education policy good impactor discussions, good impactor framework. We need to learn about the topic. Second, deliberation. We can only have a deliberative discussion. A discussion where both sides have a conversation, a good, scholarly even maybe, conversation, where we learn things from each other, where we interact in productive ways with each other. Deliberation, where we can come together to discuss and craft policies and knowledge and solutions and outcomes that are productive. If both sides are prepared, there's a famous debate, meme debate, famous piece of evidence by this author called Ruth Shively that says you cannot have a discussion about euthanasia with someone that thinks youth in Asia is a band. Euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, youth in Asia, which is actually a band. They produce music. Those are two different things. You have to be prepared to talk about something with someone to have a good conversation. I would never say, in an hour, you're going to have a graded discussion with me on this framework lecture, and then you walked into the room and I was like, okay, pop quiz on dissent. That'd be rude. You weren't prepared for that discussion. That's the argument here. The topic directed our preparation for discussion. It said we should prepare to talk about United States federal government education policy. And if you are debating about something that doesn't fall under that rubric, then that's not fair. There's no limit to what you could have discussed. Your app could be anything. And it can morph in ways that make deliberation impossible. So why is deliberation a good thing? Why is it good to have a more prepared discussion? So what if you're unprepared? The app's really important, right? They're going to have an argument that the app is really important. Maybe more important than your ability to prepare. How do you impact fairness? How do you say fairness is important? Sometimes it's really hard to know that these abstract values are more important than whatever the affirmative impact in the debate is. Because the affirmative is going to say the corruption of our education model in ways that disenfranchise people of color is racist. And it produces material inequalities. So the app's going to have a racism with material inequalities impact. And the next is going to say, but fairness for me? It's going to be hard to win. That abstract value is important. But one of the reasons you can say that deliberation and equally prepared discussion is important has to do with argument evaluation or argument testing. Debate, the negative composite, shouldn't just be a lecture, like what I'm doing right now. It's different than what happens in a debate. This is a monologue. I'm just going to talk at you. Because earlier when I asked you a question, you were all like totally silent. So I decided that wasn't going to work very well. So now it's a lecture. It's a monologue. But debate should never be a monologue. Debate should be a dialogue. Debate should be four people talking to each other, disagreeing with each other in productive ways to produce productive outcomes, evaluating each other's arguments. Debate is good, Because through the process of rigorous evaluation of arguments, we can figure out if something is true or not. My first topic when I was in high school was whether or not the United States federal government should substantially restrict its use of weapons of mass destruction. Before I was a ninth grader debating that, I had no idea what the Biological Weapons Convention was, and I had no opinion about it one way or the other. But after that year of debating that subject, I had a very firm opinion about whether or not the BWC was a good idea, and that opinion was shaped by the fact that when I read the affirmative, people pushed back because they were prepared to say, no, that's a bad idea. And I didn't willfully, ignorantly embrace my affirmative because it was my affirmative. It was vetted. It was vetted by the process of debate, by the process of prepared opponents pushing back against it. The impact, deliberation to equally prepared, rigorous testing of ideas is pushback helps you figure out what's actually a good idea. If all you read is Fox News or Breitbart, super right-wing sources, and you never test yourself by reading the Washington Post or Vox or anything from the middle or left, you'll probably lock yourself into an ideological bubble. And the same is true the other side. If all you read is U.S. Uncut, and you never push back with some middle-of-the-road sources or center-right sources with the Wall Street Journal or the Hill, which are still quality sources, even if they're very right-wing, very right-leaning, you're going to stay locked in a bubble and your ideas won't be tested. You might not disagree with what you read, but you'll vet your ideas and hopefully never read Breitbart again. If you get outside your bubble, the deliberation impact says you don't have to agree with outside your bubble, but you have to give it a chance. You have to give it a chance to have a prepared, rigorous test of the affirmative. Third impact. The state is good. The central focus of disagreement with traditional debate and non-traditional debate is if we should debate the topic through the lens of focusing on state action. Non-traditional teams will call for resistance v. resistance debate or revolution v. revolution. We should be debating counter-revolutionary strategies against revolutionary strategies that never make the state the focus of the debate. USFG bad, Judge. The NAC reading framework will say debates about the state are good. You might think that because the state has done some really messed up things in the past, that there can be no productive education debate centered around the nexus, the center point of the state. But in actuality, we can reform the state. We can make it better. And it's the largest agent of change we have. And if we ignore it, it won't change. Therefore, we need to figure out state-based strategies for change. So, we can have a discussion about Black Lives Matter and education policy, but it should be one located through the nexus of the state. This argument often becomes what is called in debate the topical version of the act. There is a way you could have talked about your thing, topical version of the act, that would have been okay and productive and good and ethical and awesome, but it has to be bound more tightly with the resolution. You say you want to talk about Black Lives Matter education pedagogy? That's great. Defend state implementation of that affirmative. Defend the federal government will direct the states and localities to have Black Lives Matter education pedagogy in the classroom and mandate that happens. Mandate that the federal government makes that a thing. Makes that a federal curriculum reform. You can still talk about everything you talked about. And we agree that the discussion of Black Lives Matter and education pedagogy is important, but you must direct it to the nexus of the state. The negative will say, this solves your offense. You get these cool things. To talk about that. But you just have to do it through the state. Okay, We're actually not going to talk about decision-making skills. Changed my mind. Given time constraints. And in a moment, we're going to talk about some things that the affirmative, reading a non-traditional affirmative, says when they read a non-traditional affirmative against framework. But I want to pause. I want to ask if you have any questions. There are no questions too outlandish. You can ask me to repeat something. You can ask me to clarify something. Yes?
Is this like the only thing you would read?
That's a great question. There are lots of alternative strategies that you can read. You could read framework with some of those alternative strategies or by itself. A lot of teams like to go for capitalism critiques against non-traditional teams, and personally, I'm a huge skeptic here. But I don't speak for everyone, and you should know that there are lots of smart debate people that think that CapK is a great strategy against many non-traditional affirmatives. There's a slew of critical scholars that argue that the way that the particularizing of movements to focus on things like problems with race, gender, sex, to focus on individual issues instead of having a class-based movement united around class that addresses all of those issues, hurts the ability of movements to be anti-capitalist, which is a better avenue of addressing whatever the harms of the affirmative are. They will say a class focus, a focus on the differences between class, a focus on the problems of wealth inequality, will better address what you wanted to talk about. But the fact that you have particularized it and made it about a single issue campaign instead of a class-focused universal campaign is problematic. And that's just the beginning of the iceberg. Just the top of the molehill, or some other phrase that's what I'm trying to say. There are lots of negative strategies against non-traditional teams. There are critiques of the making non-traditional scholarship visible, arguments that we should be opaque with our anti-state strategies. When you walk into a public classroom and you're like, here's my agenda for dismantling the state's like aware of you. You haven't done a very good job of having a subversive agenda if you're throwing it out in the open. And again, lots of other strategies. Given time constraints, I can't unpack all of them, but that is something future lectures, future labs. This is a great question to go back to your lab leader and be like, Kozak, Dan, Maddie, Kevin, Isaac, framework seems okay. I'm intrigued about other options against non-traditional affirmatives. Let's get more into that. It's a great question, and the answer is there's lots of them. Some of them can be read with framework. Lots of people read framework and cap. Lots of people think that's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea. But there's a multiplicity of strategies you can use. Framework is the one that, I'll say, links to virtually all non-traditional affirmatives. You don't defend a resolution, the negative can say, could you have please tried it? And has a high utility at the very least. Yes, remind me your name.
You're gone.
You're gone.
Sorry, could you define what non-traditional
No.
means?
Not very well, anyway. So, traditional F is one that says the resolution was the United States federal government should substantially increase funding and/or regulation of secondary or elementary education in the United States. And let's talk about that. A non-traditional affirmative says, nah, we're not going to talk about all the things that you just said. Some of them might talk about part. The Black Lives Matter education affirmative talks about education. But most people will probably read it in a way that says, but not that USFG part. There are lots of examples of affirmatives that might do this, might talk about education policy, but not talk about the USFG part. That'll probably be the most common, critical, non-traditional, performative identity app that you debate. There's like a lot of different labels for non-traditional debate, and they're all kind of fallible in their own way. Some people will call it performance debate, some people will call it identity debate, some people will call it alternative debate, some people will call it non-traditional debate. All of that gets to the general idea of affirmatives that in some significant way probably aren't defending the resolution, particularly the component of the United States federal government doing the plan. Many of these affirmatives do not want to have a discussion about the implementation of government policy. Some will be more than happy to talk to you about education, but they don't want to talk about the government implementing education policy. They may want to talk about movements that can do things for education policy, but they will say that the government is bankrupt ethically, not financially, and there's no productive discussion that can happen about government education policy. That's not universally true, but that's probably largely true. These asks will say nothing good can come from a discussion about government. Other questions? How am I doing on time? Cool. All right. Let's talk about some things that the ask will say. So, the ask is flipped over the table. They've said, screw your resolution. This is what we're debating. Here's why it's a good idea. The neg's like, wait, no more resolution? I thought that was a thing. Isn't that a thing? Can't that be a thing, please? The ask will say no, and here's why. We're going to talk about three things. Now, the problem with this lecture here right now is that KFs are all very different, and there are 1,000 different answers to framework based on exactly what your affirmative is. I'm going to problematically and loosely group them into three categories, which you will spend a debate lifetime unpacking and making more nuanced. I want to say right up front, this is not an exact template for affirmative framework arguments or description of the arguments that asks make on the framework. But for the purposes of introducing answers to framework, this is how I'm going to strategically group them. The first, working our way from the bottom up again, is exclusion. That talking about education policy through the narrow confines of government implementation excludes lots of people from the activity of debate. A sort of simple rundown for what this argument looks like is that it is wrong to ask marginalized communities to role play, to simulate, to defend the actions of their oppressor. They will postulate the federal government is bad. This is an entity not capable of producing good, historically associated with terrible, terrible policy. Racist, sexist, exclusive policy. And you should not ask someone who is oppressed by the government, by the system, to speak in that system's defense. And even if it's not anti-ethical, it is a demotivator. People who are oppressed by the government are not interested in standing up and getting to the debate to talk about why it's a good thing. Which means you see a lot of marginalized people not interested in the activity of debate, or that you see their participation peter over time. And instead, the debates that animate people are not about government policy. The debates that make some people from marginalized communities excited to get into debate, interested in the activity, and able to access the benefits of its activity are critiques of government policy. Debate throws open the doors and says, we can have all kinds of discussions. It delimits all of the kinds of traditional education pedagogy that you get in school. the traditional school. Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, Wilderson. These are authors you would never read in an 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade social sciences classroom. Afro-pessimism, the body without organs, biopower. These are words your non-debate classmates will never hear. And they're discussions that can be exciting to the people that are affected by them, especially. Discussions that can lend themselves to agency for students that are routinely denied agency. But the narrow confines of the resolution slams the door on that discussion and says you only get it part of the time. You can never have a deep discussion about it. You must always pit debates into this binary of government versus non-government. And that precludes, deters, prevents, demotivates the students who need debate the most, the one whose agency is regularly confined and restricted from entering the activity. So the next says, fit into this narrow confine, right? That's what T is. We've got this box. Be in that box. Or lose. That's what the next says. T, framework. Be the reds. Get in the box. That says, no. We need outside the box thinking. Your box is too small, and usually the ask says the box is bad for marginalized communities. But generally, the ask says, no, it's a bad box. We need different types of critical and reactive thinking. They will say that the debates over implementation that the negative wants to have produce a form of spectatorship. That we become just people watching crises. We talk about nuclear war and poverty and all these outlandish advantages. But we don't ever do anything about it. We just sit in the classroom, we talk and talk and talk, and we become immune to these disasters, numbed to the violence in the world. Armchair scholars postulating about policies that will never be adopted. Useless to the real world. And the act says we need a different type of education. In a way, the Black Lives Matter app is a microcosm of the framework debate. A smaller world reflecting the larger world, a microcosm. Because it says our education pedagogy needs to be activist. And you traditional policy debaters debating your nuclear war scenarios, sitting around, not changing the world. You say there's all these problems, but what do you do about it? No, our pedagogy, our debate activism needs to be connected to material changes for how we're going to make the world different. And your model of debate, your USFG implementation model of debate, makes us spectators instead of activists. And we need a different kind of education pedagogy because yours is scale, it's boring, and it's not working. We've had it forever, but the world isn't getting better. Like before, I'm going to cross off the top one. Who wins? Who's got the better set of arguments? Knowing that things get more diverse and more nuanced, but maybe this is the basic approach. Who should win? Should you be in the box or should you be out of the box? Is a limited discussion good for deliberation, or are those limits too exclusive? Where do we draw the line? Do you have to debate about the United States federal government? Is it unfair? Or was the game always rigged from the beginning? Was that hypothetical? I don't know. Yeah?
Maybe AF would win. The negative seems a bit too constricting. I feel as if you want to have a truly interesting debate, you want to have the possibility for more free expression of thought, more free general expression of your beliefs.
What's your name? Frederick. Cool, thank you. Shereen?
Yeah. I think there's also the issue of fairness in the realm, just because, like, if the app can run anything, like, that's outside of the box, and if the neg pretty much has no ground, they don't really have any, like, wiggle room to actually argue against this, like, app.
I find these both to be reasonable. Tell me more. Let's have more people weigh in.
I think the app should have, I think the app size, like, I think the app would win because they're saying we need to solve it before we can even talk about how it's unlimited, because we need to change debate before we can actually talk about the specifics that are going on.
Lindsay? So good. Not Emily. I don't know. You're gonna know. Melina.
I guess I'm not sure. Like, it forces the neg to run these like crazy arguments like an ivory tower fight against it, which ends up kind of like skewing the debate, because sometimes like you're not even familiar to the argument that you're making, you're just making it to not lose the ground, I guess.
You're gonna tell me I'm
Brooke.
Brooke.
I feel like the affirmative should win because the neg has the ability to run like ridiculous off-case arguments that the affirmative could never even have answers for, so I feel like it's not really ground loss or fairness loss, because the neg can do this the same thing on the opposite side.
Thoughts?
Okay, because you can have your own offense against your framework. Like you can have like a dissads against the framework, right? Which means you can like not only talk about like the framework arguments that you mentioned, but also have offense.
Okay. Kevin, last one.
I think, neg should win because, like, in order to become activists in the first place, they need to actually learn about the topic, and so, like, lots of people can get education about the topic in order to make a difference.
Okay. Well, until Kevin broke our tie, Kevin, I could not have planned this better, but there's still a roughly equal split. And that's kind of about how things are. This conversation in the debate community has been happening for a long time, and there's not a settled answer. I think it's important to acknowledge there is some reasonable arguments on both sides. There's at least a controversy that is difficult to resolve. How is the negative prepared for anything under the sun? But why would we continue a model that continues to exclude people? How do we resolve those two fundamental clashing ideas? I don't have a good answer. I think there are ways to do it better by respecting our opponents no matter what kind of debate they do, by trying to fiercely engage with them regardless of whether or not our strategy is framework or cap or another critique or another dissat against their specific ask. As long as you're respecting your opponent and acknowledging that each different type of debate has its merits, people do it for reasons that are important, it's probably good. As long as you try to engage with your opponent. But there's not a great answer. This is a clash of fundamental values about what should debate be about. Prepared, mutually fair discussion, or a different critique of fairness, that it's not fair right now because it's exclusive. It's unproductive because it produces spectatorship and not activism. There's no perfect answer. But this has been your introduction to debate ideas about framework. You're welcome to continue asking me questions, but I'm also going to let you out a little bit early. So that's all I got for you. Well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
No, because I like one. I'm kind of.
Oh my god.
Like the kid in the carnival to like.
Oh, hey, y'all, wait up 1 second. Yeah, lunch is in a different place today, right? Lunch is in the Globe, which you can find on Google Maps, or any George Mason person can lead you there. But lunch is at the Globe.
Okay, yeah, I'll take longer.
Yeah. One more time?
Like the decision making and diversity.
Oh, diversity person, I already accidentally explained what I was going to say in the category of exclusion. Decision making because it's not a very good impact, it's just a common one. I didn't want to